Me One Universe by Chad Lucas, Chapter 1, Life Part 2, Brian. I wouldn't do well in jail, just visiting stressed me out. Everything about the place, beige concrete, tiny windows, guards in heavy vests, screamed, "You're stuck here." I know that was the point, but feeling stuck was one of a dozen things that set off my anxiety hyperdrive. The second time I visited my dad here, I got dizzy, started sweating buckets, and nearly barfed. A correctional officer had to call a nurse, and it turned into this whole embarrassing scene. I hated embarrassing scenes almost as much as I hated panic attacks, so put them together and it was Brian Day's perfect nightmare. But I still showed up most Sunday afternoons because it was the only way to see my dad. I made it through the first steps okay this time, checked in, got through the scanner to make sure I wasn't smuggling anything, followed an officer to the visiting room where Dad and I would have an hour together. My breathing was shallow and my face tingled, but that was only average nerves and not full panic. Waiting was the hardest part. My brain went to weird places until Dad showed. Worst case scenarios, jail edition. 1. The jail will go into lockdown and I won't get to see Dad. 2. Someone jumped him and he's bleeding out while I sit here waiting. 3. The guards have been possessed by murderous alien spores and I'll have to use my wits to rescue Dad and stage a daring escape. My therapist, Dr. Bender, told me it was okay that I couldn't always stop my worst thoughts. Most people couldn't, but she said when I started going bleak, I should picture the most absurd worst-case scenario I could imagine. Sometimes this worked. In my mind, I was crawling through air ducts like I was in Die Hard when the door opened and Dad stepped in. He crossed the room and pulled me into a hug. He never used to be a hugger, but now he squeezed me like he was trying to imprint me into his chest. I hugged him back just as hard. Eventually, he let go and held me at arm's length. "Sheesh, B-man, you grow another inch this week? You'll be ducking through doorways soon." He was exaggerating, but I'd grown 4 inches in 5 months since I turned 13. I had to buy all new pants for school. Dad's eyes drifted toward the door. "Your mom's not here?" I swallowed. No, she was going to come, but Richie, I get it. Dad forced a smile. Can't blame him. I'd rather not be here either. If he was upset that my 10-year-old brother refused to visit again, he hid it well. We sat. My eyes drifted to the officers by the doors and the other families huddled at tables with their loved ones. I'd been coming for 4 months, and I still wasn't used to the setup. All these people and emotions in one room with hardly any privacy. That's another thing you didn't really get in jail. "So how's school?" Dad prompted, and I tried to tune everyone else out. "Ezra and I got a perfect grade on our presentation in social studies," I told him. "Miss Wirth loved it. Ezra did most of the talking, but I read 2 paragraphs out loud and didn't faint." He grinned. "Congratulations, B-man. I'm proud of you." That was a big achievement for me. I still struggled with super awkward weirdo syndrome. That's what I called social anxiety. Dr. Bender liked my nickname so much she told me she shared it with other kids. But I'd made some friends over the summer, and I wasn't as terrified as I was when I started junior high last year. The hour passed too quickly, and before I knew it, Dad was hugging me again. This time he held on longer, like he was stretching out every second he could. When he finally let go, he immediately turned toward his exit. He never looked back. I don't think he liked seeing how sad he was when I don't think he liked me seeing how sad he was when our time was up. I still knew. But I got it. I didn't like watching him head back to his cell alone either. The pre-visit anxiety was hard enough, but the ache in my chest when I left was worse. We were studying percentages in math, and I figured out that an hour was 0.595% of a week. That's how much of my time I got to spend with Dad. Less than 1%. He was serving a 12-month sentence, so this was our life until next July. I knew 1 year was a small percentage of the average person's life, but right now, it felt like forever. Some people might say he deserved it. He did help run an illegal cannabis operation, even though he never hurt anyone, and cannabis would be legal in Canada this time next year. But I didn't know who it was helping to keep him locked up. Certainly not us. I shivered and zipped up my coat as I stepped back into the cold November air. We were into the bleak part of fall when the leaves had fallen and winter was just around the corner. Gabe was waiting for me, and I climbed in the back seat of his car next to Ezra. "How'd it go?" Gabe asked. "Fine, the usual." "Want to talk about it?" Brittany asked from the passenger seat. "Not really." They didn't push. Ezra handed me a paper cup. "Hope you're cool with hot chocolate. Brittany wouldn't let me buy you anything with coffee." Brittany glanced back. I'm still not over the time I made you a latte and you started yelling about parallel realities. I can't handle caffeinated Brian. No one can handle caffeinated Brian, Gabe said. The world's not ready. Ezra laughed. Ezra had curly black hair and stylish glasses and the best laugh in the world. As Gabe drove, he and Brittany haggled over music. Ezra teamed up with Brittany for the win, as usual. By the time we reached the Mackay Bridge headed back to Halifax, they were singing along to some indie band they both loved. Gabe pretended he was annoyed, but it was impossible not to enjoy Ezra and Brittany singing. Ezra took the melody and Brittany sang harmony, and they sounded amazing. Gabe and Brittany were high school seniors, while Ezra was in the 8th grade with me. These three really kept me afloat when the universe collapsed a few months ago and Dad went to jail. They still kept me afloat now. Gabe and Brittany dropped us off at Ezra's house. I tried to stifle my yawns while Ezra fixed us a snack, but he noticed. You need a nap, don't you? I yawned again. Sorry I'm so pathetic. He tossed an Oreo at me. No biggie, go ahead. I couldn't help it. Visiting Dad wore me out, even though I was glad I did it. I headed to the basement and flopped onto Ezra's bed. The Ezra-ness of this room was always comforting. Band posters on the wall, guitars on a stand in the corner, the smell of his coconut-scented hair gel on the pillow. I usually slept well here. Except today I had a nightmare, or a napmare, I guess. Dad was trapped in his cell, filling up with water. It was nearly to the ceiling, and he was running out of air. I found Mom and begged her to help me, but she was asleep. I shook her and shook her, but she wouldn't wake up. I must have been yelling in my sleep. When I jolted awake, Ezra was at the edge of the bed. I sat up and buried my face in my hands, waiting for the echoes of my fear to fade. Ezra put a hand on my back. Did you know in 2004, a Dave Matthews Band tour bus emptied its sewage tank off a bridge in Chicago right as a boat was passing underneath, he said. A bunch of people got drenched in 800 pounds of pure nastiness. I blinked. What? Are you making that up? No, it's true, I swear. You can look it up. Ezra squeezed my shoulder. So whenever you wake up from a nightmare, you can take a deep breath and remind yourself, at least I'm not covered in poo from Dave Matthews Band. He said this completely straight-faced. Then his lip twitched and we both lost it. When I stopped laughing, I felt like 87% better. This was peak Ezra. He knew how to make me laugh and get me out of my own head. And for reasons I didn't totally understand, he also had a crush on me. My feelings for him were more complicated. Most things were complicated with me, but I'd been thinking lately that I needed to figure out what I really felt, for Ezra's sake. He deserved that. He deserved the whole world. Mom said she'll pick up some takeout on her way home, he said. You feel like pizza or fish and chips? Fish and chips, I said, surprising him. Usually I went with doesn't matter or you pick. He grinned. Feeling decisive? Trying. He stood, and I untangled myself from his bedsheets. Be more decisive was a sub-goal on my multi-step plan for surviving life part 2, and I wanted to start with my best friend. Chapter 2, Bohemian Rhapsody. Ezra. Here's one, Kevin said, which meant he was about to throw out some wild idea. Imagine everyone had to get a tattoo on their butt. What would yours say? Kevin and Ty showed up after Brian and I finished dinner. Now we were chilling in my basement, talking nonsense, and butt tattoos, apparently. Kev sat cross-legged on the floor, and I poked him with my foot. Why do we need butt tattoos? He swatted my foot away. Some evil dictator is in charge, and he's into mandatory butt tats. One cheek or both, Brian asked. Doesn't matter, you're overthinking it. It matters, Brian insisted. My butt's as skinny as the rest of me. I need to know what surface area I'm working with. Ty snickered, and Brian broke into the grin he got whenever he made a successful joke. He was quiet in public, but when the four of us were goofing around, he unleashed his inner comedic weirdo. Ty scooped a handful of chips. My butt tattoo would say chosen. Kevin took the bait. Why chosen? If we're stuck in an evil butt tattoo dictatorship, I'm the chosen one who kicks their butts. Ty hopped up and wiggled his butt at Kevin. My booty saves the day. Behold, the ancient prophecy is fulfilled, I declared in my deepest wizard voice as Kevin squirmed away from Ty. The season of the full moon has come. Tyrone shall deliver us by the power of his derriere. 19 butt jokes, a wrestling match, and one earth-rumbling Ty fart later, we were weak with laughter. Brian sprawled out on his belly with his hands tucked under his chin and let out a contented sigh. It made me happy to see him so happy, especially after visiting his dad and having a bad dream this afternoon. I tried not to worry about him too much. He didn't like making his friends worry. I also tried not to think about how cute he looked right now, all stretched out on the floor. It wasn't like I thought about that all the time, maybe 36% of the time. Okay, maybe more like 49%. We debated what movie to watch for a while and finally settled on a comedy about two nerdy high school best friends who decided to go wild on prom night. It was hilarious, but there was a scene near the end where a romantic song kicked in on the soundtrack and they realized they were in love with each other and they shared a passionate kiss on a balcony. Kevin nodded in Brian's direction. "Now I see why you wanted to watch this movie," he whispered. I poked him with my foot again. It was Ty's pick. I risked a glance at Brian. He was watching the screen intently and not saying anything. Kevin and Ty went home after the movie, but Brian stayed. We had Monday off for Remembrance Day, and he was spending the night. He fell into his distant Brian training at warp speed type of quiet once we were alone. Brian had at least 6 levels of quiet, and I was learning to tell them apart. "What do you want to do?" I asked. "Another movie? Arm wrestle? Write a song?" He didn't answer for a while. "Do you think it really works like that?" he finally asked. "Like in the movie? People can be friends for a while, and then they suddenly realize they want to be more?" His freckled cheeks flushed. I gulped. I don't think it's as dramatic as in the movies, and the kissing probably isn't as messy." Brian nodded. They looked like they were trying to eat each other's faces. I think that was for comedic effect, maybe. Not that I'm an expert on kissing or anything. I cringed. Why did I say that? Talking about kissing was making weird things happen in my head, and I might have been sweating behind my ears. That was definitely weird. Me neither, but Brian scratched his neck. "I've been thinking, how you have feelings for me." Now my face was on fire. One advantage of having brown skin was it helped hide my embarrassment, but I was sure Brian could still tell. "And I've been kind of not sure," he continued. I straightened my glasses. "Is this because of the movie? We don't have to talk about it." "I know," he said quickly, "and it's not because of the movie. Well, I guess it made me think about stuff, but I was already thinking about stuff." His face was bright red now. "I'm not explaining this very well. Honestly, Ezra, I don't know how I feel. I like the idea of liking you. You're my favorite person in the world. This made me feel a different kind of warm all over. But I overthink everything, right? So maybe I need to stop thinking. Maybe the best way to figure it out is..." He paused for an eternity. "We should try, kissing." I blinked. Did I hear him right? One sentence ran a loop in my mind, and I turned it over in every possible way. Brian wants to kiss me? Brian wants to kiss me. Brian wants to kiss me? Brian wants to kiss me? Brian wants to kiss me. Brian wants to kiss me? "Only if you want to," he added, filling in my stunned silence. "Yes," I answered, so intensely he rocked on his heels. "But only if you want to. But I don't want to pressure you or..." "No, I think we should." We were both talking at once and drifting closer together, and I still couldn't believe this was happening. In my basement, on Sunday, November 12th, I was about to kiss my best friend, the boy I'd been crushing on for months. This could be the greatest moment of my life. Or an epic disaster. Brian shifted from foot to foot. "Should we be standing or sitting?" "I think this is fine." I aimed for cool and confident, but my voice creaked like a rusty gate. "Okay, He put a hand on my shoulder. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. My pulse was drumming through my skin. "Are you totally sure?" "Ugh, I wish my voice wasn't so shaky. I don't want you to regret it or feel weird about it or like you have to or..." I forced myself to take a breath. "You're my best friend, and I don't want that to change." "It won't, I promise." For a second, he gave me a look of determination. "And I'll try not to eat your face." I couldn't help it. I started giggling. So did he, and we dissolved into a puddle of nervous laughter. I wondered if we'd ruined the moment, but when I caught my breath, Brian was still looking at me. He'd laughed so hard he had tears on his cheeks, and I reached up and brushed one away. He drew in a breath, but didn't move, so I kissed him. Our lips touched. I closed my eyes. I went electric all over, like every nerve ending in my body was playing the guitar solo from Bohemian Rhapsody. I put my arms around him, and he leaned away. Cue record scratch. I opened my eyes. The look on his face told me instantly. "Oh." Brian was blushing. "Sorry, it wasn't bad. I kind of liked it." It was exactly like Brian to be sorry that he couldn't give me what I wanted. "But it wasn't Bohemian Rhapsody," I mumbled. What?" "Never mind." I flopped onto the couch. I couldn't be too disappointed, right? He tried. Not many guys our age would kiss another boy unless they were 100% sure. Brian tried so hard for me. He was closing the door in the kindest way possible. But a piece of my heart was pinned in there, so it still hurt. He sat beside me. It was kind of nice, honestly, and I'm really glad you're the first person I ever kissed. Me too. And I meant it. I was glad Brian was my first kiss, even if it hurt a little. Maybe more than a little. It was too early for bed, and the air felt too charged to keep talking, so I turned on the second half of the Raptors game. 5 minutes in, Brian side-eyed me. Bohemian Rhapsody? I pressed a couch cushion over my face and groaned. Which part? Because if it was the verse where he tells his mom he killed a man and wishes he'd never been born, now I was laughing. No, the guitar solo, where Brian May is all dun dun dun, deedly deedly. I played air guitar and Brian headbanged, and just like that, it felt less weird. Well, less weird for us. Brian and I were still plenty weird. We were the Weirdos Alliance. When we finished, we slouched back into the couch, and Brian put his arm around me. I could have told him he didn't have to do that, but I knew what he'd say, so I rested my head on his shoulder instead. It wasn't romantic, it was nice. Nice wasn't Bohemian Rhapsody, but when you kissed your best friend who wasn't actually into you, it could end much worse than nice. I love you, Ezra, Brian said. I understood how he meant it. I love you too, I said. And I did. No matter what else I felt, I loved him like he loved me. He was the person who made me laugh, who made me feel relaxed, who I could tell virtually anything. My best friend. I could accept that. I used to have feelings for my friend Colby and... Never mind, bad example. But Brian wasn't Colby, and I was different now too. I could move on, I thought. When the game was over, we got ready for bed. I switched off my lamp and stared at my ceiling. Ezra, Brian said, we're cool, right? Yeah. Okay, he paused. It's just, you're being really quiet. I'm the quiet one, remember? I'm sleepy. We're cool, Brian, I promise. I was telling the truth, I hoped. Chapter 3, 5 Easy Steps to Save the Days. Brian. I thought kissing Ezra might solve one mystery in my brain, but it just left me with more questions. Is it weird that I'm 13 and not romantically interested in anyone? I asked Gabe and Brittany in the dairy aisle. Brittany did most of her family's grocery shopping, since her mom died a year ago and her dad was a disaster in the kitchen, apparently. My mom didn't love the grocery store either, so I tagged along sometimes and did our shopping. I liked any excuse to hang out with Gabe and Brittany was a tactical genius, so she helped me out. Plus, it was fun when we rolled up to a new cashier, 3 teenagers with 2 full carts, and they'd stared at us like we were pulling a prank. Brittany grabbed 2 tubs of half-price yogurt and put one in my cart. No, it's not weird. Movies make it seem like boys are all walking tornadoes of hormones, but it's perfectly normal not to be like that. What brought this on? I kissed Ezra last Sunday. They gave me a whoa look. I kept going. I thought we should try so I could be sure, but I didn't feel what Ezra felt. What if I never feel that way about anyone? There's no one else I want to kiss or anything. I wish I did like Ezra, because he's the best, and it would be so easy. But he'll fall in love with another guy someday, and maybe you two will get married, and what if that never happens for me? What if I end up alone, like a cat lady, only I don't like cats? What if I become an iguana guy? What if I die alone and my iguanas break out of their tank and eat my corpse? Gabe and Brittany were staring at me. Gabe bit his lip to keep from laughing. I tucked my hands in my pockets. Sorry, that was a major anxiety dump. Brittany frowned. Did you have caffeine today? Yeah, Kevin and I got iced cappuccinos after school. You should stick to tea. Too much caffeine messes with your head. Gabe set his hands on my shoulders. What I'm hearing is you still have abandonment issues, my man, but your friends aren't all going to ditch you, and there's only a slim chance lizards will eat you when you die. A woman with a baby in her cart overheard that part. She shot us a horrified look and hurried toward the cheese. Also, let's go easy on the domestic stereotypes, Brittany said. Single people can have fulfilling lives. You could go on plenty of adventures by yourself. That's true, Gabe said. Although you don't have to go on adventures alone, you could wait and bring your tall, muscular boyfriend. He can carry things. He's very handy. Brittany rolled her eyes. Gabe, really? Now? Gabe folded his arms. My awkward tension meter tingled. Wait, are you two having a fight? Gabe sighed. Not exactly. Brittany's thinking about taking next year off to travel, which is totally cool, he added as her glare intensified. I just wish we were doing it together. But you're going to have college basketball, Brittany said. That's your dream, and it's also cool. We'll have lots of time for adventures together. We can still be two independent people. I know that. I'm not trying to be jealous or controlling. Honestly, it's... Gabe stopped. His shoulders slumped. Brittany's face softened. Oh. She touched Gabe's arm. Suddenly it hit me. Gabe's dad had been in the military, and he died overseas. Gabe was worried about Brittany going away. All three of us were a little scared. A little scarred. That's why I didn't mind telling Gabe and Brittany about my weirdest thoughts. They understood me, too. Brittany put an arm around Gabe, and then she held her other arm out to me, and I joined the hug. The point is, maybe you'll have romantic feelings someday, or maybe you won't, and either way, it's okay, she said. That's the case for lots of people, but you have time to figure out what's right for you. Don't add it to your list of worries. That's long enough already. They let me go, and we steered our carts toward the checkout. How's Ezra doing with all this? Brittany asked. I think he's okay. We still hang out like normal. Gabe nodded. Ezra's a good dude. Gabe and Brittany made me feel better, as always. But as we waited in line, I started thinking about next year, when they'd be at college or off traveling the world. They were already busier now than they were now that they were seniors. They wouldn't always be around to take care of me. And then I started thinking about Ezra. He swore we were cool, but my anxiety hyperdrive was trying to convince me that his jokes felt more forced, and he looked away quicker when we made eye contact. And maybe he was pretending he was fine, but I actually broke his heart and ruined everything. Hey, Brittany poked my shoulder as we were leaving the store. Stop thinking so much and eat a half-price lemon bar. I reached into the package she was holding open and took one. It was that obvious? I know you, she said. Yes, you do, I thought as I bit into my lemon bar, and it calmed my brain for a while. My next nightmare didn't involve being eaten by iguanas, although I wished it had. That would have been less terrifying. Instead, I dreamed about a witch who kidnapped children to steal their livers, and Richie was her latest victim. I jolted awake at 4 a.m. At least it was Saturday, so I wasn't losing sleep on a school night. Looking for positive in a bad situation was another Dr. Bender tip. After I went to pee, I hovered outside my mom's room for a minute, making sure everything sounded peaceful in there. I knew it was silly, but I still did it. The nightmares were about her, even when they weren't. Dr. Bender called it post-traumatic stress. I didn't just lose Dad to jail in June, I almost lost Mom too. When Dad left, she'd broke down and taken a bunch of pills. I had to call 911. She'd ended up in the hospital, and Richie and I had to spend a month in foster care. Dr. Bender said it was natural that I wouldn't just get over something like that. The nightmares were like aftershocks. When Mom had first come home from the hospital, it took 2 weeks before I could sleep all through the night without checking on her. I'd been an exhausted bundle of panic attacks. It was super. I peeked into Richie's room next. He was sprawled on his back, breathing steadily. Then I double-checked that the doors were locked before I went back to bed and began an argument I always lost. Brian versus Brian, round 4,576. Me. Everyone's fine. Let's go back to sleep. Awesome, me. Come on, you know how this works. Me. This is ridiculous. Richie's exactly where he was 1 minute ago. He's safe. Awesome, me. Of course he is, but that doesn't matter. You can pretend this time will be different, or you can save half an hour and give up now. With a sigh, I wrapped myself in my blanket and walked back to Richie's room. He didn't stir. I could have dragged him into the backyard by his ankles and he'd still have slept till morning. As I carved out a spot in the clothes and Lego on his floor, I told myself I'd stay for just 5 minutes until my anxiety hyperdrive cooled off. I woke up to Richie hovering over me, the morning sun framing him in a halo of light. Good morning, sweetie, he said. What was it this time? You don't want to know. I always want to know. A witch was cutting out your liver. Wicked. How do you come up with this stuff? I wish I knew. Maybe then I could learn how to turn it off. Richie reached out a hand like he was going to help me up, but instead he stepped on my stomach. You turd, I gasped. He took off, earning a 5-step head start, but there weren't many places to hide in our little bungalow, and Mom was in the bathroom already. We circled the kitchen before I took him down in the living room. I had him pinned when Mom appeared. I thought maybe the house was on fire the way you two were thundering around. She wrinkled her nose. You couldn't have put on pants before going beast mode? It's Saturday, Richie said from beneath me. We don't need pants. Mom muttered something about boys and clothes and testosterone. She gave us each a kiss on the cheek before she left to catch the bus. Mom had a job now, one of a million things that had changed in life part 2. She was out a lot of afternoons and Saturdays running workshops at the community YMCA for newcomers to Nova Scotia. She liked it, and it was good for her, though she'd get annoyed if I said the second part out loud. She reminded me that she was still the parent in the house whenever she thought I was worrying too much. Richie and I toasted Eggos and hung out in our boxers playing video games, the same way we did most Saturday mornings. Richie helped keep me loose and distracted me from worrying that we might be doomed. See, I had this bad habit of reading research about kids like us. Late-night internet searches were a dangerous thing. Scientific evidence pointing to my doom. 1. Kids with an incarcerated parent are statistically more likely to have behavior problems, mental health issues, and legal troubles of their own. 2. Ditto for kids who spend time in foster care. 3. Have a parent with a mental illness? You guessed it. 4. Childhood trauma, like watching your mom nearly die, is extremely not ideal. We were basically the definition of at-risk kids. If you caught us on a bad day, Richie scruffy-haired and scowling, me dark-eyed after a sleepless night, we could be cover models for some tragic brochure about youth in need. We did have a few things going for us, though. We were only in care for a month, and we spent 2 of those weeks with Mrs. Cleland and Gabe. And let's be honest, it also didn't hurt that we were white. Another depressing fact I learned online was that Black kids in Nova Scotia were more likely to get suspended at school and stopped by police, had a harder time finding a job, and made less money even when they did. So Gabe, Ezra, and Ty, the best guys I knew, all had extra obstacles because the world was broken. But I couldn't solve systematic racism on my own, and I should focus on what I could control. Yep, Dr. Bender. So I made a plan. I wrote it down and everything. If I was organized, maybe I could keep my family and my future on track. 5 easy steps to save the days. 1. Help mom stay healthy. 2. Keep Richie on track. 3. Rule the 8th grade honor roll. 4. Improve social skills. 5. Become a basketball star. I know this is a terrible pun, and I don't care. That goes for the start. 5 easy steps to save the days. I know this is a terrible pun, and I don't care. Dr. Bender would have raised her eyebrows at the first 2, since they weren't totally in my control. Back when I saw her every week, we talked about how I wasn't responsible for my parents or my brother. But I could get groceries, do chores, and help Richie with his homework. If everything ran smoothly and Richie was happy, Mom would be less stressed, and it felt like less likely she'd have another incident. It was working so far. I also counted Mom's pills every week to make sure she was taking exactly the right amount. She'd have freaked if she knew I was doing it, but I couldn't help it. The last 3 were up to me. The work part of school had always been easier than the social part, but I was getting better. My saws still flared up sometimes, but I had 3 friends, and last week I made an actual joke in social studies. People laughed. It felt amazing. I played basketball or shot around by myself almost every day because exercise was good for my brain and it gave me something to focus on. In between all my practice and my growth spurt, I'd improved a ton since last year. My goal was to get a starting spot on the team this year. If I did well at school and sports, I had a better shot at a college scholarship. That seemed like a long way away still, but a kid like me had to be focused to beat the odds. So I worked hard, except on Saturday mornings. "I'm crushing you," Richie crowed as he whooped me in Mario Kart again. "Want to play Minecraft instead?" "Sure." He switched games and we worked on building a new world together until the doorbell rang. "Come in," Richie yelled. "We're not dressed," I reminded him. He shrugged. "It's only Leo and Kevin." The door opened and 2 seconds later, Kevin and his brother Leo, Richie's best friend, were in our living room. "I was going to put on pants," I told Kevin. "It's all good," he said. "Remember how uptight you used to be? It feels like progress that you'll have me over when you're in your underwear." "That was actually one of my milestones in therapy," I joked, and Kevin laughed, and I realized he was right. When I was with my friends, I remembered how far I'd come from shy loner Brian. I guess my plan was working. Chapter 4, Cartoon Crush. "What's your deal? You're mopey," my sister Nat told me through my laptop speakers. "I'm not mopey," I said. "Well, you're less bouncy than usual." "I'm never bouncy." "Touchy, too. 1,000 miles away, Nat peered at me on her phone like she was studying a bug through a magnifying glass. Is this a puberty thing? Are you experiencing hormonal rage, Ezzy? That's normal for a boy your age. Don't be embarrassed. Embrace your body. I rolled my eyes. Nat was 10 years older than me, and technically my half-sister from my dad's first marriage, though we didn't get hung up on stuff like that. She was great, except she leaned into obnoxious big sister mode. She waved. Hello? You're thinking about the kiss, right? Do you want to skip to the part where you pretend you're over it and admit it's bothering you? I flopped on my bed with my laptop propped against my knees. It's been a whole week, Nat. I want a pill so I can stop thinking about Brian like that and just be friends. There must be a formula that some famous white lady sells on her Instagram with essential oils or beet juice. What you need is a project, Nat said. Channel all that angst into your music or basketball. That starts soon, right? First tryouts on Tuesdays, then I'll be spending even more time with Brian. And he's extra cute in his jersey and shorts. Oh, Nat twisted a strand of hair around her finger. Maybe you should talk to him again. You know, about what you're feeling. I groaned. Why? I don't want to make him feel bad. Nat bit her lip, like she was gearing up for a lecture on honesty or something, but instead she said, What do you want? It was an annoying question because it would be ridiculous to say, I want Brian to magically discover he has feelings for me. I just want things to be cool, I guess, and I want to master this Vampire Weekend song I'm working on in guitar lessons. Want to hear it? We're changing the subject, huh? Real subtle. Nat laughed. I actually have to go, Ezzy, but be good. Don't do drugs. She blew me a kiss, then she was gone. Ty and I lived a few blocks south of school, and Brian and Kevin lived in the same neighborhood to the north, so we met up by the basketball court outside most mornings. On Monday, I had a weird flutter in my chest as Brian and Kevin approached. It was a rare weekend where we didn't hang out at all, and my conversation with Nat was still buzzing in my head. I tucked my hands in my pockets because I suddenly wasn't sure what to do with them. Should I give Brian a high five, a hug? Is that too much? Why have I forgotten how to act like a regular person? Ty greeted Kevin and Brian with a clasped hand, one shoulder bump, so I did the same. You look tired, Ty said to Brian. You stay up watching basketball or something? Working on my science project, Brian replied, rubbing his eyes. I think I know everything there is to know about the Bay of Fundy now. Seriously, Kevin asked. That's not due until Thursday. Don't be such a tryhard. It's all part of my system for success, Kev. Brian turned to me. How was your weekend? It was great. That came out so much louder than I intended. Kevin and Ty gave me funny looks. Suddenly, Kevin grabbed my arm. Whoa, don't stare, but look who's coming. Two guys were crossing the schoolyard. One was Colby. The other was taller than the last time I'd seen him and had grown a head of shaggy black hair, but we all recognized him. Victor McLennan? Huh. Ty leaned against the fence. I heard he moved. I heard a lot of things, Kevin said. I didn't think he'd be back. We stopped talking and struck casual, we're definitely not staring poses as they passed. Kevin said, What's up, to Colby. Hey, Colby said. Hey, Ty. Hey, Ezra. Hey, I said. Victor gave us the slightest nod. Then they moved on. We all turned to Brian. He went red. What? I'm not worried about Victor. Good, Ty said. You shouldn't be. Brian and Victor had a history. Last year, Victor had picked on Brian until Brian punched him in the face. Stuff like that made people go wild in junior high. When Victor didn't show up in September, rumors flew all over the place, but I guess he was back now. I wonder what his story is, Ty said. I bet Colby knows, Kevin said. There was a time I could have asked Colby. We used to be best friends, but we hadn't really talked since last June. That was also the last time I saw Victor. I went to Colby's house trying to figure out why Colby and I weren't getting along, and I told him I was gay. Victor overheard the whole thing. Whatever. Coming out helped me learn who my real friends were, and I had 3 great ones right here. The bell rang. Brian, Ty, and I headed to homeroom. Victor wasn't there, which didn't surprise me. Our principal, Miss Flerman, knew better than to put Brian and Victor together again. As much as I didn't want to, I thought about Colby and Victor all morning. At least it was a distraction from thinking about Brian, but it wasn't much better. My friends knew Colby ghosted me after I came out to him, but I'd never mentioned that Victor was there too. I didn't really know why, I just didn't. Victor had been surprisingly chill about it, better than Colby, but it was still strange that he was one of the first people to know. I didn't hide who I was anymore. On the first day of 8th grade, I wore a t-shirt that said human in rainbow letters. But it wasn't like I announced my sexuality at a school assembly. Straight kids didn't have to do that, so why should I? Besides, I was used to people not knowing how to figure me out. Sometimes I got funny looks when someone tried to match my Polish last name, Komisarek, with my brown skin and curly hair, or when I was out with just Dad, who's white. Mom reminded me that I never owed anyone an explanation about who I was, so I didn't sweat it, most of the time. We walked to Kevin's house at lunch, and when we were huddled in his kitchen, he raised his hand dramatically. I have an update. Victor's in my homeroom, and he didn't say a word. He whispered to Colby, but he didn't talk otherwise. He mostly just stared out the window. He's all broody now, like Zuko in Avatar. Broody Zuko. Yikes, it slipped out, and I instantly regretted it. Kevin choked back his laughter. Ty patted my arm. Ignore him, Ezra. There's no shame in crushing on an Avatar character. I've watched every Suki episode 5 times. He turned to Brian. Biggest cartoon crush. Go. Brian turned pink. When I was 6, I wanted to marry Doc McStuffins, Kevin admitted. Ty pointed to him. See, it's normal for Ezra to be hot for the Prince of the Fire Nation. What was hot right now was my entire face. Kevin shrugged. I guess. Broody does seem to be your type. He looked from me to Brian and flashed a wicked grin. I kind of wanted to kill him, but Brian laughed, so I guess he wasn't embarrassed, and I tried not to make it weird. Still, I owed Kevin a good burn. As we headed back to school, I was thinking of comebacks. It was better than thinking about Victor.